Okay, so we are in Mishpatim. We've had the 10 Commandments, and now Mishpatim is a continuation. Many laws. I don't want to focus on those laws today. Usually when we do the commentary, we look like, why are we studying about laws allowing slavery right after we were freed from Egypt, right? Why are we talking about this? There are extrapolations of manslaughter versus self-defense here. There are laws about taking care of the stranger. There are laws about expansion of Shabbat, which sort of got the headline in the 10 Commandments, and it's fleshed out a little bit more in our portion. That is amazing. I can give you beautiful classes. You've already had a beautiful class if you've come to the Thursday class about that and the mezuzah, making the hole in the ear for the slave. We're not looking at that today. Today, I wanted to look at two things. The first is just a historical conception of where we are, why the Torah is doing this, and what are the other cultures that the Jewish people have learned from that sort of institute the structure of our Torah readings right now. So that's going to be number one, and a look at different ancient Near East concepts and how our Torah is both similar and also extremely different. That's number one. Number two is we're going to look at a little deeply, and what we're going to look is really the last chapter and a half of Mishpatim. And the second one is, this is a brit. A brit is translated as a covenant. This is a treaty. This is some sort of agreement that God and the Jewish people are making. That is what happens at Mount Sinai. Is this the first covenant that we find in the Torah? All right, tell me what are some of the other brits, some of the other covenants we found in the Torah?
Did Abraham with the
thing? Yes, Abraham, when he sacrifices the animals, he puts them in half and walks in between, right? It's called the covenant of the pieces, or Brit B'Tarim. But yeah, okay, good. Any other covenants?
One of the most famous one is
Yeah. Are you
cutting ceremony.
cutting ceremony, which is?
Rudin-Luria.
Oh, so circumcision. Okay, good.
Later.
Circumcision. All right. Any other covenants we've had?
The flood.
The flood, right? Noah and the flood, right? And there's a whole brit that happens after there. God promises God will never destroy the world again. The rainbow is going to be the symbol, right?
No.
Great. Right? That's, by the way, a covenant not with the Jewish people, but with all of humanity. Any other covenants? We've had a couple more. Jacob has a couple promises and agreements. And what we're going to look at is, and actually maybe we'll look at this first, is, then we'll get to the historical stuff later, but I have an endpoint that I need to get to. I know you guys like to talk, so. To get to the one endpoint. So what I'd like to do is if you have the booklet, the packet, we're going to go to page something. I want to say like page 4. There actually is a very interesting parallel between the binding of Isaac, the Akedah, and our portion. So it's labeled page 325. I don't know if that's the second, third, fourth page on the packet. Back of the third page. So I want you to set that up, but now I actually want to read a little of the Parsha because not all of us are versed in the Parsha. Not all of us have been studying the Parsha all week. So if you have the Chumash, I'd like you to turn to page 474. 474.
Chapter and verse was Nelson.
It is Exodus 23, verse 20. By the way, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. I didn't say that. It's great to teach. This is one of my favorite classes, and I don't get to do it enough. So great to be with you. I love that we have every Shabbos morning studying here. It's amazing. Okay, so again, we are starting exactly after 3 full chapters, chock full of laws. I think there are 50 commandments that we've sort of that's what happens in the first part of this portion. And now we're at part 2 of the portions. So after going through all these laws, and you can see the last one is the laws of kashrut, right? You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk, right? That you can't have a cheeseburger, right? And that's the sorry. Right? And now we're gonna get to another section. Someone want to read, I am sending an angel.
I'm sending, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please, go.
I'm sending an angel before you to guard you on the way and to bring you to the place that I have made ready. Pay heed to him and obey him. Do not defy him, for he will not pardon your offenses, since my name is in him. But if you obey him and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes.
So I want to just pause for 1 second. This is not law anymore, right? We could have looked, right? There are very clear laws. If you have a slave, this is how you treat the slave. If the slave wants to free, this is it, right? Laws about Shabbat, laws about civil cases and criminal cases. This is not law. What is this?
Promise.
This is a promise section, right? This is if you follow the laws, and that's what we're gonna see. These are the promises, the blessings. All right, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, isn't that a covenant?
I'm not saying it's not a covenant, but I'm saying it's not law.
Gotcha. Well,
Yeah.
promise, I was confused
Yeah.
about promise.
When my angel goes before you and brings you to the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I annihilate them, you shall not bow down to their gods in worship or follow their practices, but shall tear them down and smash their pillars to bits. You shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. No woman in your land shall miscarry or be barren. I will let you enjoy the full count of your days. I will send forth my terror before you, and I will throw into panic all the people among whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn tail before you. I will send a plague ahead of you, and it shall drive out before you the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply to your hurt. I will drive them out before you little by little until you have increased and possess the land. I will set your borders from the Sea of Reeds to the Sea of Philistia, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hands, and you will drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them and their gods. They shall not remain in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me. For you will serve their gods, and it will prove a snare to you.
Okay, stop. This is the end of a section. Here are these promises, blessings. Anything sort of pop out? Again, this is whenever I read Mishpatim, I don't read this usually. So, this is, we actually do we hear this, see this other places. Yeah.
Difference between these promises and what happens in the second part of the Shema.
Yeah, so this is almost equivalent to other places where there's this idea of divine reward and punishment. One is the Shema. If you just came in, we are in the Chumash, the Red Book on 476. Good. Other comments, thoughts? Yeah, Bill?
I might be wrong. I think I studied one. So if you go back to 24, and it talks about smashing all the pillars to bits. I think I studied, I might be completely wrong, that the God's names and the like were written on those. And that this is really where we get the don't write God's name in paper and the like, that's, I think from us, we don't, it's using God's name in vain isn't the argument for God's name on paper and the like. Is that anything you've ever heard?
I think that actually, we address that in Deuteronomy later.
So it's wrong. Okay.
No, it's not that it's wrong. No, it's not that it's wrong. It's expanded and later in Deuteronomy. I see you, Sheila. I just want to say one thing, right? One of these folks, there's sort of 2 pieces to this that I see. One is that God will protect us and be with us and send an angel. By the way, it's not clear if that angel is divine or a person. Again, the word is malach. Messenger, which can be human or divine. And the commentator, the rabbis debate whether this is some divine thing or just a person that's gonna lead us to this place. Number two is this sets up what's gonna happen for the rest of Jewish history, right? When the conquest of the land happens with Joshua. By the way, here it doesn't say it's immediate, right? And if you know historically, it actually took a very long time for the Israelites to conquer the land, not how like the Torah and the Bible says it was immediate. And even today, right? And there are these questions about, Gaza Rivieras that will happen immediately, right? And how realistic is that, right? And, not to make, I just made a political, but not to make a political statement. But I want to emphasize one thing here, and then we'll get to Sheila and David I think the most important thing here is the second commandment of the 10 commandments, which we already had, which is don't worship any other God. Right? That's the focus here. And, I said one of the things I want to talk about is a covenant or a treaty, right? If we are making a treaty with God, right, we are professing our loyalty to God. Right? So one of the important signs of loyalty is we will not worship any other God. Right? So it makes sense that this is emphasized here, and God promises that in response to that, as Elliot said, God will bless us. And these are a list of, right? God, no women will miscarry, all these things. All right, Sheila and then David. Yeah.
You asked what stands out.
Yeah.
Well, the line you just said, no woman in your land shall miscarry or be
Yep.
barren. I mean, that's a really big statement to make.
And a big, yeah, halavai, right?
Halavai is right. So, he's so specific.
Yeah, very specific. All right, David?
So building on that, there seem to be a number of statements in here that are, if you will, ideals that
Yes.
we don't get to.
Yeah.
Like borders that go to the Euphrates,
Yes.
which never so
We're
far
gonna
has
talk about that in
happened.
a minute. Yeah.
Great concept. Supposed to,
All right.
the
Yeah, just
River to the
I'll
sea.
pause you for a second. So what David said is right there, these established borders here, which are not real, they are not the borders of Israel, right? This is basically all of the Middle East, Sea of Philistia, by the way, is the Mediterranean Sea. Right, but this is a further expanse. So now, if you want to look at historically, there was an Egyptian pharaoh that had this was his exact empire borders. So there's a question whether, right, God is saying, right, I'm going to make you as great as the greatest emperor that ever lived to this point.
Which was kind of the next point I was going to make, which is that if you place these things in context, which I guess we're going to do with the handouts, this would have been very understandable, I think, to the people at the time, because it would have related to something like that. Oh, the borders of Pharaoh so-and-so, that means a great empire.
Exactly.
So maybe one can understand it from that perspective, and then I'll just throw in there that maybe Joshua makes it look like it was all at once, but Judges certainly doesn't.
Yeah, 100, right. And even the Bible itself has different versions of the conquest. And I want to get to chapter 24, and then I want to get to all my sources, but.
I don't think you're gonna do anything with this, but why in verse 23, it lists six people,
Mhm.
and in
That's right.
20,
Yeah, go ahead.
verse 28, it only lists 3 of them.
Right, this is the reality of
I
the
mean,
conquest.
it's
This-
like Rafi.
Yeah.
Not Rashi, but Rafi.
Yeah. Again, right, this is already saying, if you didn't catch what he said, right, the first labels that there were 6 tribes that were in Canaan,
There's 7?
and there were 7 tribes. Yeah, I didn't look which one is missing. The Ammonites? Yeah, the Ammonites.
No, it's here in 23.
Okay, yeah, it doesn't matter, but yeah, right, and why 3 here? I think this is again the reality, right? God says they're all gonna be removed, but but there's a gradual process. This is, I think, this acknowledgement that it's not gonna be an immediate thing, which is not realistic anywhere, even if this is saying God is even saying that's not ideal for God's purview of it.
Oh, I forgot.
Interesting that nobody says that today in the news.
Yeah, right, exactly.
They don't quote this.
If you'll let me, I know other people want to talk. I wanna just go a little bit more. I want to read chapter 24 also. Again, this isn't a chapter we often focus on. And then I want to sort of process all these commentaries. I'm gonna give you some commentaries as we're making what we're doing too. So someone want to read 24?
I'll read. Then he said to Moses, come up to the Lord with Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel, and bow low from afar. Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but the others shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him. Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of the Lord and all the rules, and all the people answered with one voice, saying, all the things that the Lord has commanded, we will do. Moses then wrote down all the commands of the Lord. Early in the morning, he set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He designated some young men among the Israelites, and they offered burnt offering and sacrifice bowls as offerings of well-being to the Lord. Moses took one part of the blood and put it in basins, and the other part of the blood he dashed against the altar. Then he took the record of the covenant and read it aloud to the people, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will faithfully do.
I will pause you here for a second. So number one is, like, we're actually meeting people we haven't met before. Nadav and Abihu appear here for the first time, I believe, right? We know their story later, right? Is they are Aaron's sons who offer a strange fire and are killed when they enter the Holy of Holies, right? So it's interesting that here they have a very prominent role. We don't really focus on it. Number two is the rabbis actually debate when this actually happened. Like, a lot is happening here, and they're unclear if this is chronologically at this moment, if this happened earlier in the Mount Sinai experience, just for you to know. And right, because the people sort of say all the thing, you know, we agree. They said it, if you remember the beginning, they said we agree to everything. So what are they agreeing here? What is Moses writing down? Right, if you look in the Hebrew later, it's in the second time you mentioned, it's called Sefer HaBrit, the book of the covenants. Right, so what is this? Is this the Torah? Is this the 10 Commandments? Is it whatever? I'll tell you what I think it is, or not what I think, right? What some rabbis think it is all the laws of Mishpatim. Right, Mishpatim, as I said, had 50 commandments in it, give or take. Right, so it is those 50 commandments which Moses reads aloud to everyone, and there they say, right, we will, whatever you say, all that you will say, we will do. Okay.
Here they don't understand it. They don't even agree.
Based on what they say, they just say, yeah, okay, go ahead.
Where are we?
Something like 9, 10,
8?
8,
Moses,
8, okay, 8, yeah.
Moses took the blood and dashed it on the people and said, this is the blood of the covenant that the Lord now makes with you concerning all these commands. And Moses and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu and 70 elders of Israel ascended, and they saw the God of Israel.
Again, like these 70 elders appear here, right? We don't have them before. We see them, they appear later in the Torah. And who are the Ne'arim? Who are these young men too? We'll talk about that. Keep going.
Under his feet, there was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Yet he did not raise his hand against the leaders of the Israelites. They beheld God and they ate and drank.
Right? Are you allowed to see God?
No.
Not in.
Right? There are a lot of people seeing God here, right? Moses, Aaron, Nadav, Abihu, the 70 elders, right? They see God and they live. And that was that line, right? They beheld God. God did not raise God's hand against them. And then they eat and drink, and we'll talk about why they're eating and drinking here. Okay, go ahead.
I don't remember this in Mishpatim.
Yeah, keep going.
Does it seem like
Because we focus on the law. Yeah, keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings and commandments which I have inscribed to instruct them. So Moses and his attendant Joshua arose, and Moses ascended the mountain of God.
Wait a minute, Joshua wasn't with them.
Exactly. Well, as I said, it's very
Unless he's one of
complicated.
the elders.
The young
Probably not,
strapping.
right? It's complicated. Keep going. Yeah.
To the elders, he had said, wait here for us until we return to you. You have Aaron and Hur with you. Let anyone who has a legal matter approach them. When Moses had ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain. The presence of the Lord abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the seventh day, he called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. Now the presence of the Lord appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. Moses went inside the cloud and ascended the mountain, and Moses remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Again, there's so much to say, and talk here. I guess now that I made you turn to that page, I want you to go to the first page of the handout that I gave you, just to like set our context. Okay. Covenant in the form of a Hittite suzerainty treaty. Okay, which means in English, there were already ancient Near Eastern treaties between rulers and those under the ruler, subjects, specific subjects like under rulers, lieutenants, right? In the form of a treaty where, and the Hittites were a certain tribe that lived north of Canaan. And so we have archaeological evidence. There are cuneiform stone tablets and also big stones that have inscribed in them these covenants that were between a lord, or master and someone underneath them. So we're gonna look. Each of these covenants actually has a certain different type of, they have a structure of 7 things. So, and it's called suzerain and vassal. Vassal is the person underneath. So if you look, sections 1 and 2, right? There is a historical prologue always in the beginning, and we don't have it here in our portion, but the Exodus story is a historical prologue, right? Why are the Jewish people making this covenant with God? Because God came and saved us, right? That's a good reason. That is a good historical prologue. And by the way, also Exodus 19, which is before the 10 Commandments, also repeats it in a sort of more metaphorical way, right? I bore you on eagle's wings so that you shall be an Am Segula, a treasured people, right? This is a more, a higher poetic way of restating this history that happened. All right, section 3, covenant stipulation. This includes demanding the vassal's loyalty, restricting his political activities. Significantly, the vassal was prohibited from entering an alliance with another sovereign. I hear, at least this text is saying, right, have no other gods than me, right? You must exclusively obey me. Right, so number 1 was this historical prologue setting the relationship. Number 2 is that there are covenants. They were promises made, laws that must follow in order to keep this relationship going. Number 4 is that there were witnesses, right? It lists who was a witness to it. And we already see who witnesses this covenant.
Everybody.
Right? Who witnesses it? The entire Jewish people. Right? This is the entire Jewish people doing it. Then we get blessings and curses. That was chapter 23, which we read. Right? All the blessings, the no miscarriages and all the other stuff, all the promises of protection. Right? Section 6 involves depositing the covenant in a sanctuary and ensuring it would be read regularly. Right? That is the inscribing it on the Sefer Habrit, the book of the covenant, which was written by Moses and read to the people aloud. And then the treaty was ratified, that's section 7. The vassal agreed to the treaty, read it aloud or had it read before him. Formal ratification was accompanied by an animal sacrifice meal and ceremonial meal. So now if we sort of understand, and I'm doing this very fast, I'm sorry, right, that the entire structure of basically Exodus 19 through 24, from last week's portion to the end of this week's portion, fits in with the structure of other covenants that were made between Sumerian, Akkadian, Ugaritic, Hittite, and other leaders and followers, or gods and kings also, which we didn't talk about. Yes, Elliot.
So I just wonder, why would God have chosen a stiff-necked people to make him his favorite people that's supposed to be exemplary, the Or Goyim?
Oh, 5. You know, there are all these reasons why. Oh, do you have an answer, Jen?
say,
Yeah.
like the challenge.
Oh, that's okay. You know, there's also like there's also a midrash on this, which I don't love this midrash because it casts every other peoples as a bad people. But you know, a traditional midrash where God presents the Torah to every single nation, and his Jewish people are the last people. God goes to the Arabs and the Greeks and the Romans and the this and the that and says, here is my list, right? And they read it and they say, oh, well, we don't think murder is a bad thing. We can't agree to this, right? And you give it to another one, oh, we don't think stealing. Yeah, we're big on stealing. Forget it, right? Oh, adultery, right? Right? And right, God presents the Torah and the laws to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people say,
Them and Ishma.
whatever you say, we're good. We'll follow whatever you tell me. So, right, that's not the answer, but that's the traditional answer, right? So it's not a great answer, but it's an answer. So I really just wanted to pose to you, right, that, you know, there are two ways to look at this. One is, just a historical idea to understand the context of why our texts are this way, because it fits in with the same way that everyone else living in that region made covenants. Number two is that there's an idea that the Torah is written so that human beings can understand it. Right? That God intentionally, right, did these things so that we would follow and understand. Right? So maybe it's that God knew that this is the way that other people did it, and that's what the Jewish people needed in order to understand it and follow it. Yeah.
Some people say that it is because God saw the BP power,
BP, what's that?
brain power in them.
Oh, in the Jewish people.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't,
That's what they-
I don't, I can give you, these are what sermons. I can give you a whole sermon. Why? I don't have an answer. Yeah, I'm getting a little, today it's a little more textual, historical, yeah.
Exactly the kind of thing as a historian I like, but anyway, two things. One is, again, talking about context and people being comfortable with understanding this maybe in a way that we have to struggle harder at a distance to understand. It seems to me that if you tie this in with the Nevi'im, you get the negative fulfillment of that, because you see that one of the things that the prophets are struggling against is you're still worshiping the Canaanite gods on the side.
Yeah.
It's like, you're trying to, well, just in case or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I think maybe another way of looking at it, because you have a whole spectrum, I guess, of midrash or homily on this subject, but another way of looking at it is, it kind of makes a statement. If you make a group of former slaves who are not by any means the largest group, even then, the Am Segula and the a kingdom of priests and a light unto the nations, then that says that it's not because we're so great, it's because God can do something like that.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe that's your answer, Elliot. Yeah, beautiful. So what I want to do is now I want to look at this connection between the Akedah and chapter 24. And then I want to go through a couple specific lines and understand, like we read it very quickly. There's actually a lot to unpack from this. So now if you go to the back of the third page in the handout I gave you, which is 325, Nelson, did you want to say something as we're shifting?
Yeah, this time I want to say the fact that we have a covenant is what makes us a stiff-necked people. Otherwise, we're just wiggling. People all wiggle. We choose one thing, we change our mind. But once we agree to do only one thing, then we're stiff-necked. So it's God it's the covenant that makes us stiff-necked. And God understands, I think, that it doesn't matter what people he chose, they would be stiff-necked.
Thank you. Yeah. And so my kids still are. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so what I want to look at is now we're switching books. This is, you can see this is from Torah commentary from Yeshivat Har Etzion called Torah Mei. Let's see. Okay, so this is from Rav Yonatan. So he finds there are actual very specific literary connections between the story of the binding of Isaac, Genesis 22, and this ratification ceremony of a covenant in Exodus 24. So if you look at this chart that begins on 325 and the next one, you can see there are like the same verses exist in both, right? Abraham rises up early in the morning. Moses rises up early in the morning. Abraham says to his servants, you wait here with the donkey, the boy and I will go up, we will worship and we will return to you. And then there's a verse where the elders, it was said, wait here for us until we return to you. Okay, turning the page. This is a hard turn page, okay? Right? Abraham says, on the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place from afar. Here the word is from afar is the core word. It's a hard flip, 326. Right, then God said to Moses, come up to the Lord with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and the 70 elders, and bow low from afar. That phrase from afar, everybody on the right page here? You have to flip the wrong way. It's 326. Yeah, it's there. You just gotta keep flipping and you'll find it. All right, you got it? 326. Trust me, it's in the packet. It's just, it's an unexpected flip. You got it? Yeah, all right. So basically, right, from afar, this phrase from afar appears in both. Abraham built an altar there, offered up an olah in place of his son, right? They set up an altar at the foot of the mountain. They offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. They offered, by the way, an olah and a shlamim in our situation. The knife in the Akedah, if you know this is actually one of these things. It's actually not called a knife, the knife that Abraham holds up. It's a very interesting word. The word is ma'achelet, from the word achal, to eat. And the rabbis have a whole, there's all these commentaries why it's not called a knife and it's called the eating thing. But here it's called eating, the knife. And if you caught, there's a phrase that says, the presence of the Lord appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a eish ochla, a eating fire, a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. So that word appears in both of these stories. And finally, don't raise your hands against the boy, right? God will not raise their hands against the leader of the Israelites who saw that, right? This was seeing God, right? So are you sold? Like there are 6 comparable verses in these 2 chapters that are, and they're actually core parts of the story, I will say, right? The bowing from afar. That's like a pretty important part in the story. The bringing of the burnt offering. That word achal is an important word in here, right? Don't raise your hands. You're not sold, but I'm going to give you what Rabbi Grossman says, right? I think it is clear based on all the above textual comparisons between the 2 sections, the Torah wants us to remember the binding of Isaac when reading this enactment of the covenant. Right? He thinks it's very important. So I'm going to jump to another page. You'll have to find it. It's not a jump you like. It's a backwards flip again to 328. And now I want to sort of give you what his take, what he learns from this. The back flip that you won't expect, 328. Light of a parallel between this covenant, which is called the covenant of the basins, Brit HaAganot, and the Akedah Yitzchak and the binding of Isaac. Perhaps we see the binding of Isaac as Abraham as an individual commanded to sacrifice his son, that all of Israel was required to offer their sons to, right? He's playing on this, why are those young men involved in this? We'll get there later. So, sorry, now I want to jump down. In some sense, now we're under Roman numeral 2. These 2 accounts are diametrically opposed to one another. Abraham is asked to sacrifice not only a son, but also his moral conscience. The setting which surrounds the Akedah is one of hardship, sorrow, and death. After all, the request made of Abraham was to end a life, to alienate himself from reality. In utter contrast, this Exodus 24 and Mishpatim is characterized by the linking of beholding God and eating and drinking meeting God at occasion which is full of happiness and fervor. In addition, there were feelings of deep identification with God. The essential element is a feast marked by rejoicing and religious exhilaration. The Akedah, the binding, is characterized by fear of God, by offerings. In contrast, Exodus 24 is full of jubilation and love. From this distinction, we can abstract two diametrically opposing pictures of an encounter with God. One can strive to come close and meet God through personal submission, feelings of sacrifice, pain, and sorrow. But another is to meet and identify with God through grandeur, elevation of one's soul, and joy, to challenge and build a wonderful life, not separate away from it. The binding was performed alone and in solitude, whereas this was, Exodus 24, was done in front of the entire people in an awesome experience within a larger congregation. So, I mean, you can see the sort of the differences. What do you think? Are you sold on this? Do you get anything from this? Is there an idea that these were two different covenants, that you can sort of see them diametrically opposed, but they also sort of, Abraham really, this was a really important moment for the Jewish people when he bound his son Isaac, right? And this is the affirmation of Mount Sinai and the formulation of our unending covenant with the Jewish people with God. Yeah, Bishan.
Is there a commentary about the verse where it says, "You stay here with the donkey and I'll be back"? Whereas he could have said, "You stay here and I'll be back." Why is the emphasis on the donkey? Is there anything that is said?
Not sure. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know.
Shalom Paul says the same thing all the time, which I brought up before, that if there's really only one story and they have used, it's the same theme for different characters. Like all the women in the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they all meet their wives at the well and things like that. So that
it's the same recurring theme.
it's the same theme with additions, sort of, advancing the idea.
Yeah. Well, I actually, what my takeaway from that is, and then we'll get to my second topic I want to get in the next 10 minutes. My takeaway is that, there is a theology called predicate theology or process theology, that God's relationship with us grows, like a parent grows, a parent-child relationship, that like in the Garden of Eden, God basically fed us and clothed us. Right? And generation to generation, God's involvement matures just as the people mature and the Jewish people mature. So what I see from this is the Akedah was, really severe, and that God grew from this. God saw that we didn't have to literally put our children on a stone to offer to sacrifice them. But here, in Exodus 24, it's our children who are offering the sacrifices with joy to God. And that's the continuation of the future. We don't have to hold our son and say, we're going to promise that our son's going to remain Jewish with the threat of almost killing him, as opposed to, look, our children joyously want to celebrate and be Jewish. So that's my 2-second take on it. Yeah. Yes, Jan from Buffalo.
One thing that kind of struck me, I was wondering if, God's, one of the promises is, I will make all your enemies turn tail before you.
Yes.
But if we go to after this, was that promise really kept?
Well, did the Jewish people keep all their promises too? But yeah, right, it's a good, right. These moments we make big promises, right?
But that's also the nature of this kind of suzerainty covenant, because if you don't adhere, you make an alliance with somebody else, you get punished. And we often think in terms of punishment, it's something we did. We don't say that those who conquered us because they were stronger. We say they conquered us because it was a lesson. We behaved badly. They were just a tool of God. That's the way we understand these things through history, and I guess that's the other side of stiff neck. Stiff neck could be negative. You just refuse to do this. Why do you keep refusing to do this? But the other side of it is, as those of us, you want to find Jews in Rome, go to the Arch of Titus, because we all stand there, look at the arch, see what the menorah might have looked like, and then say, we're still here and they're not.
Yeah, and my other answer, I think it might sort of be what David's saying, right? These were pretty grand promises. Like, again, if you
Yeah.
look in the other historical treaties from around that time, these are grand promises that not everyone has held, ideal promises. Yeah, Bill, and then I want to get
I'll try to make.
dive deep to finish up.
So I don't read it necessarily as much as a parallel. I read it as a repeating of the Akedah, because we failed the test. Abraham didn't fail the test. He took out the knife. He was going to complete the task. We failed. We couldn't stand at Sinai and see God. We had to back off. And it always bothered me that we had to have all these rules that came as a result. If we had had that revelation more face to face, we might not have had halakha like this. We might not have needed that. We would have had more of a Christian experience, right? In a way, that connection with God. But we, as a people, for whatever reason, failed. We weren't able to do it. Moses, you go do it. You go see what God wants us to do.
Yeah.
And who knows, we might have had a whole different relationship. And so in a way, we failed. And so God's in a way repeating for the people what he did for Abraham. And I don't know if we've ever gotten to that.
My one quick response is, remember that I like what you're saying, but a counter potentially is, right? This is immediately following the plagues, right? Like the Israelites saw the good and the punishment side of it. So there was fear, even though, right, this is all about joy and love and all this, right? They saw the firstborn, killed. Right, and again, now I want to look deeply at chapter 24. So then there's another question, even just the Ne'arim, who are these young men? And maybe this is these are the firstborn Jewish males that were not slaughtered in the Pesach story. So, okay, so now I'm compartmental. I'm a compartmentalizing person. So now we're gonna put everything away. I want to look really closely at chapter 24. There are some things that we didn't flesh out. I want to flesh out a couple and show. So again, we could spend an hour on each verse here. I want to just look at a couple. So we're on page 476. Then God said to Moses, come up to the Lord with Aaron, Nadav, and Abihu, 70 elders, and bow low from afar. Have we seen this before, the idea of bowing low from afar? I'll remind you, when Jacob approaches Esau after their estrangement of 20 plus years, and Jacob sees, right, there are these 7 prostrations that Jacob does, these prolonged prostrations from afar to slowly approach Esau, right? And again, if we want to use the framework, right here, Jacob is submitting, as a servant to a master. And again, if we understand this treaty concept and everything else, it's interesting. And ancient Near Eastern protocol is that a vassal in the presence of their suzerain would do a diplomatic courtesy bow from afar, slowly making their way forward with multiple bows. So, right, not only is it what Jacob and Esau did, but this is what other people did in this context at that time period. Right, Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but the other shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him. You can actually sort of divide Mount Sinai into 3 zones, right? The people are at the base of Mount Sinai, then Aaron and the delegation are some way part way up, and then Joshua somewhat appears too. There's a base camp, somewhere in the middle, right? And Moses makes all the way up. So, right, there are all these sort of designations of levels of contact with God and holiness, and who can get close, who can see what, and what can, what did they see versus Moses up top see, right? Again, the rabbis, really delve into this, especially the mystics. But just to tell you, there's a lot there. Sefer Habrit, the book of the covenant, right? Or right, where is that? Moses wrote down all the commands of the Lord, right, which is later called the Book of the Covenant in verse, I think, 7 or 8. Right, we find this one other place. You know where the other place in the Bible we find the term Book of the Covenant, Sefer Habrit?
Is that what Joshua does on the stones? They go,
Oh. You know, there's a story of King Josiah. This is really late in biblical history. King Josiah finds a scroll in the temple, right? And the high priest Hilkiah, right? And the people had not been following the law so well at the time, right? And they renew their covenant with this found scroll. And there are all these trying to understand, but that scroll is called Sefer Habrit. So again, that's a sort of renewal covenant ceremony where the people sort of were probably not following Jewish law so closely and the promises so closely, and they recommit themselves. So again, just sort of an interesting thing. Okay, so who are these Ne'arim? Who are these young men? Any thoughts?
I was thinking it started with Nadav and Abihu.
Could be, but
It was the next generation.
could be.
Question is also, how young were these young men?
Right, so if you look at the comment here, there's 5, you know, for
We have to read
comment
the
5 right here. The strenuous task of slaughtering multiple bulls and preparing them for the altar could only be accomplished by young men.
No.
No, well, I don't know, that's what it
Because-
says right
because
here.
Aaron does it time after time later on.
I'm just telling you, that's what the comment,
So that's why I don't agree with the comment.
that's what the comment says, right? So I will tell you that other peoples, you know, again, other ancient Near Eastern peoples at the time had a class of young cultic assistants who were subordinates who assisted the cult worship leaders.
Oh, you had that in Greece.
Altar boys, yeah, what I,
Greece,
yeah.
you had, yeah,
In a positive way. Right, and also the Ugarites, or another sort of people, had a guild of temple servants, right? The rabbis, so here's the rabbinic answer. I didn't give you the rabbinic answer yet. Kohen, Levi, Yisrael did not exist yet. Remember, there's only Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu here. There's no other priests, and actually Aaron has not yet been anointed as the priest. That actually happens later. Yeah, that's later in this book. So there actually isn't a priest that exists yet. So before there were actually Kohanim,
There were firstborns.
there were firstborns. There were firstborns. And by the way, if you know, right, I think in like Roman Catholic Italian families that are very traditional, the firstborn male is designated to be a priest, right? In very traditional families, right? That the firstborn son is supposed to be a priest.
It says 70 elders also had gone up.
But they didn't do
Never
that,
offered the
but they're not all,
sacrifice.
right, that is in distinction, right? That elders versus these people, that's in there, the Ne'arim.
But it also says the altar was set up at the foot of the mountain, not. so
Again,
that's-
well, these are the zones.
Right, so.
These are all these different zones, yeah,
Higher up.
Does the number for Sanhedrin come from here?
yes. the numbers.
70.
Yeah, the number from San.
We also have later on, I think it's probably in somewhere in Bamidbar when we're substituting, maybe it's somewhere else, you can tell me. There's
Yeah.
a count where
Pidyon
they
and Ben.
say, okay, there are
Pidyon
this
and
many
Ben.
firstborn, and then we have a few extras, so.
Yeah, the numbers, and that's where Pidyon and Ben comes from. Right, so do you know about that, right? When a baby boy's 30 days old, right? When a baby boy's lived, and it's, you know, there are a couple designations, right? So ideally, again, right, we do this ceremony because you actually, has anyone had a Pidyon, done a Pidyon and Ben here? Right, it is with a Kohen, a priest, you literally give your baby at 30 days old to the priest. And then you do that, then you do this payment. So again, firstborn male,
And you have that in that count because they say we're substituting the Leviim,
yes.
and we
Right,
don't.
so, again, right, I don't wanna get dredged up in this, but it's just interesting, and again, like, we could spend a whole class on trying to figure out what this word means. By the way, sometimes in the Bible, it means baby, sometimes it's child, sometimes it's young man. It's different, right? Hagar in the Hagar story, it's a Na'ar, and other places there are these Na'arim.
Is the association with firstborn?
Yeah.
That's the rabbis say that.
Oh, the rabbis.
The rabbis are saying that. Yeah. The rabbis understand. It doesn't say it in the, okay, I'm gonna sort of jump, right? What's this dashing of blood? There are all these ideas. Some say actually it's just the pillars and actually Moses didn't actually do it on the people, but the 12 pillars stood for the 12 tribes and all the people, so
Yeah.
people didn't actually get blood splattered.
I've heard that other times.
Yeah.
I've read that other times with the throwing of the blood at the altar. What is that? That seems so foreign to me.
The idea is that actually that was purifying.
That was.
The blood, yeah, that way, it's a purification ritual.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have Purell.
Yeah, there I go.
Sacrificial blood.
And this also, they're either water or this or some combination, yeah. Yeah, but also, right, blood is the living, this is our living thing and there's like power, blood is,
It has
and that's
power.
why we don't eat blood,
We
right?
drain
All
the
this
meat,
stuff,
right?
right? So, yeah, blood, again, could do a whole class on blood. Okay, this sapphire brick. I
That in
wanna-
mind for Thursday.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this. I want to talk about the sapphire brick. We're actually, that's gonna be the last thing we do. I'm gonna jump, if that's okay to you, to the last couple of verses. So the eating and the drinking, we said that is what's happened in other cultures when they sort of completed the treaties. So the rabbis give another answer. It's 24:11 if you want to look at the verse. Right, so here are a couple other ideas. Some rabbis say they didn't actually eat, they were on such a spiritual high and so satisfied with their lives and feeling so full that it is if they ate and drank on the mountain. Okay, that's number one, right? And physical eating only lasts momentarily, but this lasted them with a satisfaction for the rest of their lives. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that they actually made it a yontif. They mark this as a holiday, this moment. And when you have a holiday, you eat. That's what Jews do. We eat when we have a holiday, right? They had brisket and, simmis and kishka, and all the fixings, right? Because they celebrated. And that is why our tradition is when you complete the studying of a book,
See you.
you have a siyum, and what is it? What do you do when you have a siyum?
Party and eat.
And you drink. Okay. The last two verses, then we're gonna finish with the whole sapphire brickwork. Okay, so 17 and 18, right? God is a consuming fire. Moses went inside the cloud and ascended the mountain. Moses remained on the mountain. Okay. So again, this.
So here the fire is consuming, but at the burning bush, it didn't consume.
I know, right? It's very interesting, right? Yeah, good. You got one of the things I was gonna say is right here, the fire is consuming as opposed to the burning bush is,
Not consuming.
right? It's not
From the
consumed,
tops of mountains to consume.
right? The bush was on fire, but it wasn't consumed. Yeah. And also, right, there's a pillar of fire and cloud, right? This is another place in Exodus, right? Does that pillar of fire consume anything? It's just there as like a guide, right? Doesn't burn anything up. So again, like, it's just an interesting phrase and trying to figure out what does it mean that God consumes, doesn't consume.
Also kind of begs the question, because it's called a consuming fire, but it never says what it's consuming.
Yes, right. So again, not an answer, just something to put out there. Okay, for the 40 days and 40 nights. So here is a midrashic understanding. Moses entered the cloud and climbed up the mountain. God made a path within the cloud for Moses so he could make his way to the top. Of course, God could have taught Moses the entire Torah in less than 40 days and 40 nights. The reason 40 days and 40 nights is done to teach that if a person wants to study, they must do it slowly, very intently, in order to understand that all that they are learning, because a person who learns quickly doesn't absorb the information. Also,
Slow down, Rabbi.
yeah. Also, for why 40 days and 40 nights? Because it is the same time that it takes for a human embryo to attain human form. In 40 days, Moses became like a new person, born anew, no longer the same Moses that he was before.
The new Moses could.
Moses even befriended all the angels there. And each angel taught Moses a secret mystery. Even the angel of death taught Moses how to make a remedy, an antidote for the plague, which was passed down to Eleazar, then to Pinchas, who we say in our tradition is Elijah. And Elijah has the antidote to the plague. Take it what you will. This is the rabbi's midrash. Okay, so what I want to end on, and it's 10 o'clock already, so go really fast. This idea of the sapphire brickwork, right? When they looked up and they saw that on page 478, verse 10, they saw the God of Israel. Under God's feet was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. So now I'm going to give you the first, like the historical whatever, which is, we thought this was this beautiful transparent, translucent blue sapphire stone that you looked at. And what was called sapphire back then is not our sapphire. Sapphire back then was actually lapis lazuli, which is imported from Afghanistan,
That's
by
the
the
only
way,
place it's
highly
been.
valued in the ancient Near East, right? It was a stone that had metal veins. So still a gemstone, but not this beautiful transparent blue, but lapis, which is also a very beautiful stone, but it's a different image. So that's the historical idea. Now we'll get a little bit to what the rabbis say.
Why don't we use this blue for the talit string rather than?
Because
we were told to use.
Because the rabbis understand it as sapphire and not that, because it's reminiscent of the ocean or the sky and the vastness of God, and that when you looked up, that is what you saw. And so the rabbis understand it as blue sapphire and not lapis lazuli, which, by the way, again, an Ugaritic king had stones of lapis lazuli at the bottom of his throne. So again, now we get all these sort of similar things.
Does any of this
So-
relate to Yehezkel? Because the
Yes,
beginning.
and
Yehezkel is-
right, Ezekiel also has a vision, and it's the same words are used here. But it doesn't say blue there, so it's just the same words are used. So yes, Ezekiel also has a vision of God and sees a sapphire brick pavement. So we don't really know what it is. And by the way, the rabbis also debate whether it's actually blue or white, because if you look in the Hebrew, on verse 10, the last word on 478, leave not hasafir, which we translate levanot or bricks, but lavan is white. So the rabbis actually debate whether it was white or blue. And they say that white was actually the color of creation, the original light of creation. And if you think about eggs and they think about eggs and new beginnings, right, is white. So the rabbis actually debate even whether it was actually blue or whether it was white. So again, I'm not going to get in there, but there are pages and pages where the rabbis are debating about that. So I want to close with number one, like if you think of a sapphire, think of as opposed to the yellow brick road, right? A blue pavement. How amazing is that, right? You peer up and you see a throne, right? Sitting on a blue pavement. Amazing, I think anyway, right? Awe-inspiring, amazing, right? This is our God. How beautiful and amazing it is. When we look up at the sky, we think about that. And we look at the ocean, we think about the vast grandeur of God. Now I'm going to give you a little last thing. So if we understand that it's not white, that word, but it's actually brick, which is the words for brick, there is a moving story and a difficult story. So it is a little triggering to what's happening in Israel right now, but if you will let me share it, I will share it. So there is a traditional midrash that, I have to get the words here. The taskmasters of Pharaoh were beating the Israelites, right, in order that they should make bricks. We know that. That's the story of Pesach, right, when they were slaves, right? And the bricks were that word. Okay. That word for brick, pavement, pavement is brick. That's the same word. That's the same word used in the Torah. Okay. The Israelites had to gather straw in the desert in order to make the bricks. And they carried it on their donkeys with their wives and their sons, and they were forced to make bricks day and night. The women kneaded the clay alongside their husbands, and the straw that they picked was extremely sharp. It would pierce their hands and their feet and their legs, and blood would mingle with the mortar. There was a pregnant woman making a brick. She gave birth to a baby that died. And that baby died because it became entangled in the brick that the woman was forming. Her cry ascended before the throne of God, and the angel Michael descended, took the brick molded in the clay, and brought it up before the throne of God. That night, God descended and smote the firstborn of Egyptians, and it came to pass at midnight that God smote all the firstborn of the land of Egypt. So I want to give, that's the traditional version of this midrash, that this moment actually moved God so much of seeing the loss of this baby, that God actually went and brought the Exodus and freed the Jewish people. So one of my teachers from Hadar, Rabbi Tali Adler, wrote a little different version of it. They say the moment that finally pierced the heavens was when the Jews were in Egypt, the moment when a mother was forced to give birth, working in the cement mixing vats. Her baby became ensconced in that mortar. They say the angel Gabriel took the baby, embedded its cement, and laid him before God's throne. That is the brick pavement that was underneath God's throne. That's what it is. Those bricks were the bricks that the Israelites were forced to make as slaves was there. And then I'm going to give a sidebar because there are like 5 different versions of this midrash. So there it says, God says, I'm always with you in your times of trouble. That is a verse from the Torah, right? So the idea is that God saw the Jewish people suffering, and that the angels laid this brickwork underneath his throne to remind him, so he could feel the sorrow and the difficulty that the Jewish people were going, to finally push God to intervene. And that's what that pavement means. They say God kept the brick there, and that when Moses and the elders ascended to heaven, they saw the brick there and knew how God cherished that child that passed away. This is what Rabbi Adler writes. There's a lot I don't understand about this story. I don't know why it took this long and took that much for God to have to intervene. I don't know how human beings can look on as babies die. I don't understand 3,000 years later, the world is still so much the same. I don't know how the Midrash author managed to write this story about the cruel death of a beautiful baby through tears. I don't know if his heart would have been strong enough to lift his pen to paper if, like us, we had to write the story about a mother and her 2 baby boys who were killed instead.
Rabbi, I just kind of tangentially related. On Thursday in Israel, there was a rainbow.
I saw
Did
that.
you see that?
I saw that.
And also, it does feel like a miracle to me, I think to many, that enormous plan to
Yes, the bus.
on the buses and
Yes.
suicide bombers, and that the bombs were set for 9 p.m.
Yes.
by mistake instead of 9 a.m.
Thank God.
Doesn't that feel like a miracle?
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you for studying with me. Shabbat Shalom. Look forward to my time with you. This is the best class. Keep it up. Spread the word. Thanks. Sorry I didn't get all of you online as much as I could today, but you're learning with me online. And we'll see you soon.